Hi all, today we are taking notes on day 5, which is quadratic inequalities. We are graphing, so you will need some graph paper. First, taking a look at what we did before. We graphed quadratics in standard form and also in vertex form. Today, we are going to graph quadratic inequalities. So the only thing that changed is we now have an inequality rather than the equal signs that we had before. We're going to do 2 examples, one together and then one on your own. Our first example, y is greater than x squared, add 2x, subtract 1. This starts out very similar to graphing in standard form. First thing that we're going to do is find the vertex. Remember that the x coordinate of the vertex is negative b over 2a. In this case, b is 2, so the opposite of that is negative 2, and our a is 1. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. In order to find the y-coordinate, we need to substitute in negative 1. We end up with negative 1 squared, add 2 multiplied by negative 1, subtract 1. So 1 subtract 2, subtract 1, that ends up being negative 2. So in this case, our vertex ends up being the point negative 1, comma, negative 2. Our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. Just the x coordinate of the vertex. Now we're going to fill out our table. I'm going to put the vertex in the middle, choose 2 points lower than negative 1, so negative 2, negative 3, and 2 higher, 0 and 1. Now we need to substitute these x values in to find their corresponding y's. I'm going to start with x equals negative 3. So this ends up being 9 subtract 6 subtract 1, which is just 2. Now remember, this y and this y should be the same because of the symmetry of the parabola. I'm going to substitute 1 in again just to make sure that I get 2. So we end up with 1 add 2 subtract 1, which ends up being 2 again. Now I'm going to do negative 2. So this ends up being 4 subtract 4 subtract 1, which is just negative 1. Substituting in 0, remember that when you substitute in 0, you end up with this number right here, the y-intercept. And again, these match because of the symmetry of the parabola. Now we're ready to graph. I'm going to start by graphing the axis of symmetry, x equals negative 1. Remember that the parabola will be a mirror image of itself on the 2 sides of this axis. Now our vertex, negative 1, negative 2 is right here. And we have the point 0, negative 1, the y-intercept, negative 2, negative 1, 1, 2, and then negative 3, positive 2. Okay, our parabola is opening up, which is good, because we have a positive coefficient on the x squared. It's 1x squared. Positive 1 means opening upwards. Because our inequality is greater, but there's no equal, this is going to be a dotted parabola. So make it a parabola, but make it dotted. And last thing to do, because this is an inequality, we need to decide which way to shade. There are 2 ways to decide. The first way is look at the inequality. Y is greater than. Greater means above, so we want to shade above the parabola. So that would be in here. Another way is to choose a test point. I'm going to choose the test point 2, 0, because that's clearly not on the parabola. Okay, substitute in. You end up with 0 is greater than 2 squared. Okay, 2 squared is 4. Add 4, subtract 1. We end up with 0 is greater than 7. Is this true? Clearly not. So we want to shade where 2, 0 is not. 2, 0 is that point right there. So we want to shade not outside the parabola, but inside, where we do not see 2, 0. Okay, that was the example that we did together. Right now, I would like you to pause the video and try this one on your own. Take a few minutes. When you're finished, come back and I will show you how to complete the problem. Okay, welcome back. We're going to start by finding the vertex. So we have negative b over 2a, which is negative 6 over 2 multiplied by negative 2. Oh, negative 1. I'm sorry. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 ends up being positive 3. When you substitute 3 in, you should end up with negative 1. So your axis of symmetry is x equals 3. Table then should be through 3, 2, 1, and then 4, 5. When you substitute in 3, you get negative 1 because that's the vertex. Now I'm going to substitute in 1. So this ends up being negative 1, add 6, subtract 10. That ends up being negative 5. If I substitute in 5, I should end up with negative 5 again. So I'm going to do that just to make sure. This ends up being negative 25, add 30, and then subtract 10, which is again negative 5. Okay, now substituting in 2. This is negative 4, add 12, subtract 10. Negative 4, add 12 is 8, subtract 10 is negative 2. Last one, substituting in 4. This ends up being negative 16, add 24, subtract 10, which is again negative 2. Okay, now we're ready to graph. I'm going to start again by graphing the axis of symmetry, x equals 3. Remember that that's a vertical line at x equals 3. So our parabola should look the same on both sides of this axis of symmetry. Now to graph the parabola, the vertex 3, negative 1 is right here. And then I have 2, negative 2, and 4, negative 2. And then 1, negative 5, and 5, negative 5. Okay, this time our parabola, or our inequality, does have an equal sign, so this is a solid parabola. Last thing, figure out the shading. Y is greater than. Greater than always means up. In this case, that means to shade above the parabola, which is outside. So it's all this stuff outside the parabola. Okay, if you chose to do a test point instead, a good one would probably be 0, 0. When you substitute that in, you get 0 is greater than or equal to negative 10. This is true, so we want to shade where 0, 0 is. Shade towards the origin, which we did here. So that was notes for day 8.